Jalen Freeman was just walking home from school. Three white boys, sons of the most powerful men in town, dragged him into the woods, beat him, and left him to suffer. But Jalen isn't alone. His father, Caleb Freeman, has spent 2 decades hunting enemies in silence. Now he's back home. And this time, the enemies wearing sheriff badges and courtroom robes. One by one, the fathers will learn. This SEAL doesn't call the police. He doesn't post online. He handles things personally. But as Caleb moves in on the men who hurt his son, he discovers something darker, a secret they've buried for generations. What happens when a father built for war brings justice to a town that's never known it? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the dirt path. Jalen Freeman's running shoes kicked up small clouds of dust as he made his way home from track practice. His muscles were pleasantly sore from the workout, and the cool autumn breeze felt good against his skin. He pulled out his phone, thumbs tapping out a quick message to his mom. Practice went great. Be home in 20. Letitia's response came quickly. Proud of you, baby. Dinner's almost ready. Jalen smiled, sliding the phone back into his pocket. The shortcut through the woods saved him a good 15 minutes compared to taking the main road. He'd walked this path hundreds of times before, knowing every twist and turn by heart. The familiar sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the wind surrounded him. His mind wandered to the upcoming track meet this weekend. Coach Thompson said he had a real shot at breaking the county record in the 400-meter dash. The thought made his chest swell with pride. All those extra practice sessions were finally paying off. A twig snapped somewhere behind him. Jalen's steps faltered for just a moment, but he kept walking. The woods were full of small animals, probably just a squirrel or rabbit. Still, something made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He picked up his pace slightly, keeping his breathing steady like he did during training. Another snap, closer this time, and what sounded like hushed voices. His heart rate quickened. The path ahead curved around a thick cluster of oak trees, blocking his view of what lay beyond. Jalen's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He thought about his father's words from their last video call. Always trust your instincts, son. They're trying to tell you something. Right now, his instincts were screaming at him to run. Before he could act on that impulse, heavy footsteps pounded the dirt behind him. Jalen spun around just as 3 figures burst from the tree line. He recognized them immediately. Chase Boyd, the sheriff's son, along with Colton McClellan and Tanner Lattimore. Well, look who it is, Chase sneered, his pale face twisted into an ugly grin. The track star himself. Jalen's mouth went dry. He took a step backward, mind racing through his options. The main road was too far to make a break for it. The woods were too thick to run through at full speed. And these guys were football players. Big, strong, and used to tackling. I don't want any trouble, Jalen said, keeping his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. I'm just heading home. Tanner Lattimore circled to Jalen's left, while Colton moved to the right, cutting off his escape routes. Maybe you shouldn't be taking shortcuts through our woods, Colton said, cracking his knuckles. Might give people the wrong idea. These aren't your woods, Jalen replied, his father's training kicking in as he shifted his stance, trying to keep all 3 in view. This is public land. Chase laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything in Mason County belongs to someone, boy, and you need to learn your place in it. Jalen's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his mom wondering why he hadn't responded to her last message. The thought of her waiting at home, dinner getting cold, made his chest ache. But he couldn't reach for the phone now. He couldn't take his eyes off the 3 advancing figures. Last chance, Chase said, pulling something from his back pocket that glinted in the fading sunlight. You can come with us quiet-like. or we can do this the hard way. The woods seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper. Jalen's heart pounded against his ribs as he realized this wasn't going to be just another school bullying incident. The look in their eyes told him they had something much worse planned. He thought about his father again, about all the lessons on self-defense and standing your ground. But they'd never covered what to do when outnumbered 3-1 by guys bigger than you, at least one of them armed. His muscles tensed, ready to fight or run, whichever option presented itself first. The phone buzzed again in his pocket, insistent now. His mom would be getting worried. The thought nearly broke his concentration, but he forced himself to stay focused on the immediate threat. The three boys had formed a tight triangle around him, close enough now that he could smell the cigarette smoke on their clothes. Chase moved first, lunging forward with something metallic in his hand. Jalen managed to dodge, but Tanner's massive arms wrapped around him from behind, pinning his arms to his sides. The struggle kicked up clouds of dirt as Jalen's feet left the ground. "Got him!" Tanner growled, tightening his grip until Jalen could barely breathe. Chase pulled a white hood over his face, followed by Colton and Tanner. The sight made Jalen's blood run cold. They'd planned this. They'd waited for him. "Get him in the truck," Chase ordered, pointing to a beaten-up pickup parked just off the path. Jalen thrashed harder, but Tanner's grip was like iron. His feet scraped against the ground as they dragged him toward the vehicle. "Let me go!" Jalen shouted, hoping someone might hear. But the woods swallowed his voice, and Colton's fist slammed into his stomach, forcing the air from his lungs. They threw him into the truck bed like a sack of grain. His head cracked against the metal, sending stars dancing across his vision. Before he could recover, rough hands grabbed his wrists, binding them with duct tape. More tape covered his mouth. The engine roared to life. Through blurry eyes, Jalen watched the trees whip past as they drove deeper into the woods, bouncing over roots and rocks. His phone had fallen out during the struggle, lying somewhere back on the path. No one would know where he was. After what felt like forever, the truck stopped in a clearing. They yanked him out, and his knees buckled when he hit the ground. The masked boys formed a circle around him. "Time for your lesson," Chase said, voice muffled behind his mask. His boot connected with Jalen's ribs. The beating seemed to last forever. Fists and feet rained down from all directions. Through the pain, Jalen heard their taunts, slurs that cut deeper than their blows. He tried to curl into a ball, to protect his vital organs like his father had taught him, but they kept pulling him apart. "This is our town," Tanner spat, landing another kick. "Don't you forget it." Colton hung back, landing fewer hits, but he did nothing to stop it. Through swollen eyes, Jalen saw him grab Jalen's backpack from the truck. "Look what I found," Colton called out, trying to sound tough despite the tremor in his voice. Tanner laughed, unzipping his pants. "Let me show you what I think of your homework." The sharp smell of urine filled the air as he soaked the backpack, containing Jalen's books, phone charger, and track uniform. Something wooden scraped against the ground. Through the haze of pain, Jalen saw them erect a crude cross, maybe 3 feet tall. Chase pulled out a lighter, and flames licked up the dry wood. "Remember this," Chase said, grabbing Jalen's hair and forcing him to look at the burning cross. "Remember what happens when you forget your place." They left him there, bleeding into the dirt. The truck's engine faded into the distance, leaving only the crackle of flames and Jalen's ragged breathing. The sky had grown dark, and the temperature was dropping. Using every ounce of strength left, Jalen began crawling toward where he thought the road might be. His whole body screamed in protest. Blood dripped from his nose and split lip, making dark spots in the dirt. He didn't know how long he crawled. Time seemed to stretch and blur. Headlights cut through the darkness. Tires crunched on gravel. Jalen tried to call out, but could barely manage a whisper. "Lord have mercy." A familiar voice said. Mr. Rawls, who owned the farm at the edge of the woods, knelt beside him. The old man's weathered hands were gentle as he checked Jalen's injuries. "Hold on, son. I'm calling for help." The ambulance arrived in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. His mother's tears fell on his face as she rode with him to the hospital. The doctors cleaned his wounds, wrapped his ribs, documented everything with grim faces and careful photographs. Late that night, in the quiet hospital room, Letitia paced back and forth. Her hands shook as she dialed a number she rarely used. It rang 3 times before connecting. "Caleb," she whispered, voice breaking. "They hurt our baby. They hurt him bad." In a dark motel room somewhere across the country, Caleb Freeman listened in complete silence as his wife described what had happened to their son. When she finished, he spoke just 2 words, his voice as cold as steel. "I'm coming." The morning sun cast long shadows across Mason County's main street as Caleb Freeman's rental car, a plain gray sedan, rolled into town. He'd driven through the night, his mind replaying Letitia's words about Jalen's injuries. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but his face remained perfectly still. The Lucky Star Diner sat on the corner of Main and Oak, its neon sign flickering weakly in the early light. Caleb parked across the street, studying the building's worn facade. Through the large windows, he could see the morning regulars hunched over their coffee cups. Inside, the bell above the door chimed softly as he entered. The smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee filled the air. A few heads turned to look at him, a stranger in their small town, before quickly looking away. Caleb chose a booth near 2 elderly white men, their clothes suggesting retired farmers or factory workers. "Coffee?" the waitress asked, already pouring before he could answer. Caleb nodded, keeping his movements minimal and controlled. He opened the menu but didn't look at it, focusing instead on the conversation floating from the next booth. "Heard about that ruckus out by Rawls' place," one of the men said, his voice scratchy from years of cigarettes. "Sure did, Earl. Some boy got himself roughed up pretty good," the other replied, stirring cream into his coffee. "Sheriff's boy was involved, from what I hear." "Well, you know how it goes. These young ones nowadays, they don't know their place like they used to." Earl's voice dropped lower, but not low enough. "Start getting ideas above their station, thinking they can date our girls, join our teams." The other man grunted in agreement. Shame it had to come to that. But sometimes a lesson needs teaching. Caleb's coffee sat untouched, steam rising in lazy spirals. His breathing remained steady, measured, the same breathing pattern he'd used before countless operations. His eyes tracked every movement in the diner while his ears caught every word. "You hear they burned one of them crosses?" Earl asked, excitement creeping into his voice. "Just like the old days." "Keep your voice down," his friend hissed. "But yeah, I heard. Boyd's boy knows how to send a message, just like his daddy used to." The waitress returned to Caleb's table. "Ready to order, hun?" Caleb looked up at her, his eyes so cold she took an involuntary step back. "Just the coffee," he said softly. The men's conversation continued, growing more animated as they discussed the good old days, when people knew their place. Caleb memorized every detail. Names dropped casually, locations mentioned in passing, the way they spoke about the sheriff and judge like old friends. A young deputy walked in, nodding to the old men as he passed. "Morning, Mr. Earl, Mr. Thompson." "Hey there, Jimmy," Earl called out. "How's the sheriff handling all this excitement?" The deputy shrugged. "You know how it is. Lots of paperwork, but nothing'll come of it. Boy probably started something he couldn't finish." Caleb's hand tightened slightly around his coffee cup, the only visible sign of the rage building inside him. He'd seen this before, in villages across the world. The casual way people talked about violence when they thought it would never touch them. The diner filled up as the morning wore on. More conversations drifted past, whispered rumors about Jalen, about troublemakers from the black part of town, about how these things sort themselves out. Each word painted a clearer picture of Mason County's power structure. Caleb sat there for nearly an hour, barely moving, barely breathing. To anyone watching, he might have seemed lost in thought or killing time. But his mind was working with mechanical precision, mapping out the town's dynamics, identifying pressure points, calculating angles of attack. When he finally stood to leave, he placed a $5 bill under his untouched coffee cup. The bell chimed again as he pushed through the door, stepping back into the morning sun. The rental car started quietly, and he pulled away from the curb with the same careful control that marked everything he did. Behind him, Earl and his friend continued their breakfast, unaware that they'd just given a Navy SEAL everything he needed to begin dismantling their carefully protected world. The fluorescent lights of Mason County General Hospital cast harsh shadows across Jalen's bruised face. Caleb Freeman stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the sight of his son. Purple welts marked Jalen's cheekbone and jaw. His left eye was swollen nearly shut. Letitia rose from her chair beside the bed, tears welling up as she embraced her husband. Caleb held her tight, his eyes never leaving Jalen. "The doctor says nothing's broken," Letitia whispered against Caleb's chest. "But they want to keep him another night for observation." "There was some internal bruising." Caleb nodded, gently releasing his wife. He pulled a chair close to Jalen's bed and sat down, his movements deliberately slow and controlled. "Hey, son." "Hey, Dad." Jalen's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I need you to tell me everything," Caleb said softly. "Every detail you can remember. Take your time." Jalen swallowed hard, wincing at the pain. "I was walking home through the shortcut. By the creek." His voice trembled slightly. "They had masks on, but I knew who they were. Their voices." As Jalen spoke, Caleb listened intently, his face a mask of calm. He noticed how his son's hands shook when describing the cross they'd burned, how his voice caught when recounting their words. Letitia stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, fighting back tears. "They took pictures," Jalen added, "on their phones." Laughing about it, Caleb's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He pulled out his own phone and carefully photographed each of Jalen's injuries, making sure to capture the distinct pattern of boot marks on his ribs. The backpack sat in a hospital bag by the bed. He documented that too, paying special attention to the cigarette burns and slurs carved into the fabric. "I'll be back soon," he told them, kissing Letitia's cheek and squeezing Jalen's hand gently. The afternoon sun was harsh as Caleb followed the creek path to where it happened. He moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the ground like he'd done countless times in combat zones. Boot prints in the mud told him there had been 3 attackers. Cigarette butts, Marlboro Reds, lay scattered near a scorched patch of earth where they'd burned the cross. He collected them carefully in a plastic evidence bag. Tire tracks led deeper into the woods. 4-wheel drive, newer model, probably a pickup truck based on the width. He found scraps of rope near a fallen log, frayed ends suggesting they'd been cut rather than untied. These went into another bag. Back at the hospital that evening, the sunset painted the room in orange and shadow. Caleb sat between his wife and son, his voice quiet but firm. "I need their names," he said. Letitia looked away. "Caleb, maybe we should let the police handle this." "The police?" Jalen's laugh was bitter. "Sheriff Boyd's son was one of them, Mom." Caleb's expression didn't change. He waited. Finally, Jalen whispered, "Chase Boyd, Colton McClellan, Tanner Lattimore." Caleb committed each name to memory, noting how Letitia flinched at the last one. The judge's son, the hardware store owner's boy, the sheriff's pride and joy. Each name carried weight in Mason County. Later that night, in his sparse motel room, Caleb stood before the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as he methodically arranged items on the counter. A basic flip phone, still in its packaging. A matte black folding knife, well-maintained. A set of professional-grade lockpicks in a leather case, and a small black notebook, its pages crisp and new. He opened the notebook to its first blank page. With precise, measured strokes, he wrote the first name, Boyd. The Mason County Sheriff's Office sat like a squat brick fortress on Main Street, its windows tinted against the morning sun. Caleb Freeman adjusted his collared shirt and stepped through the glass doors into the artificially cool air of the lobby. The front desk deputy barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle. "Can I help you?" "Here to see Sheriff Boyd." Caleb's voice was quiet, but carried an edge of authority that made the deputy look up again. "And you are?" "Caleb Freeman, Jalen Freeman's father." Something flickered across the deputy's face. Recognition, maybe even a hint of discomfort. He picked up his desk phone and murmured into it, eyes darting occasionally to Caleb. "Sheriff will see you now." Down the hall, last door on the right. The hallway was lined with framed newspaper clippings celebrating Sheriff Boyd's achievements. Drug busts, charity events, high school football victories from his coaching days. Caleb noted each one, building a picture of the man he was about to meet. Sheriff Darrell Boyd's office door stood open. The man himself sat behind a massive oak desk, his bulk straining against a khaki uniform. A half-eaten breakfast sandwich leaked egg yolk onto its wrapper. "Mr. Freeman." Boyd's smile didn't reach his eyes. "What can I do for you this fine morning?" Caleb remained standing, hands loose at his sides. "I'm here about my son's assault." "Ah, yes." Boyd wiped his fingers on a napkin. "Deputy Wilson took that report. Unfortunate business. Kids getting rough with each other. 3 boys kidnapped and beat my son while calling him slurs." Caleb's voice remained level. "They burned a cross." Boyd's chair creaked as he leaned back. "Now, let's not throw around loaded terms like kidnapped. Boys will be boys. You know how it is. Sometimes roughhousing gets out of hand. They took pictures." "So I heard." Boyd shrugged. "But no one's seen these alleged photos. And without evidence, there's plenty of evidence." Caleb pulled out his phone, showing the photographs of Jalen's injuries. Boot prints, defensive wounds, the burned backpack. Boyd barely glanced at the screen. "Could have gotten those bruises anywhere. Maybe a fight at school? I hear your boy runs track. Could have fallen during practice." The sheriff's dismissive tone made something cold settle in Caleb's chest. He noticed the family photos on Boyd's desk, including one of Chase in his football uniform, grinning next to his father. "Your son was there," Caleb said quietly. Boyd's face hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Freeman. I'd be careful about spreading rumors without proof." Jalen identified them, all 3 boys. The word of one confused, injured teenager. Boyd stood up, using his height to loom over the desk. "Against 3 of Mason County's finest young men? Good luck making that stick." Caleb didn't move, didn't flinch. His stillness seemed to unsettle Boyd slightly. "Look," Boyd continued, his tone shifting to what he probably thought was reasonable. "I understand you're upset, but these things happen. Kids get into scraps. Best to let it blow over. Is that what you'd say if it was your son in the hospital?" Boyd's face flushed red. "Now listen here." "No," Caleb cut him off softly. "You listen. This isn't going away. What happened to my son wasn't roughhousing. It wasn't boys being boys. It was a hate crime. Get out of my office." Boyd's voice shook with barely contained rage. "And if you keep spreading these wild accusations about my boy, you'll find yourself facing harassment charges." Caleb held Boyd's gaze for a long moment. He noticed the slight tremor in the sheriff's right hand, the sweat beading at his hairline. Behind the bluster and badge, Boyd was afraid, not of Caleb specifically, but of what his presence represented. Change, accountability, the end of business as usual in Mason County. "Have a good day, Sheriff." Caleb turned and walked out, leaving Boyd standing behind his desk, breakfast forgotten and cooling on its wrapper. The front desk deputy watched him leave, pencil frozen over his crossword puzzle. Through the tinted windows, Main Street continued its morning routine, oblivious to the quiet war that had just been declared in the sheriff's office. After leaving the sheriff's office, Caleb drove to the county courthouse, a white-columned building that loomed over the town square. The marble steps led to Judge McClellan's chambers on the second floor. The judge's secretary, a thin woman with steel-gray hair, tried to stop him. "Sir, you need an appointment." Caleb walked past her desk. "He'll see me." Judge Charles McClellan looked up from his leather chair as Caleb entered, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the morning light. Unlike Boyd's messy office, the judge's chamber was immaculate. Law books precisely arranged, degrees perfectly straight on dark wood panels. "This is highly irregular," McClellan said, his voice carrying that particular southern drawl that suggested old money and older prejudices. "So was what happened to my son." Caleb remained standing, just as he had with Boyd. McClellan removed his glasses, folding them carefully. "Ah, you must be the Freeman boy's father. I heard about that unfortunate incident. Your son Colton was there. A serious allegation." McClellan's smile was practiced, patronizing, one that could damage a young man's reputation, especially without evidence. "There's evidence. Hearsay from an injured teenager hardly counts as evidence in my courtroom, Mr. Freeman." Caleb stepped closer to the desk. "This isn't your courtroom, and I'm not here for legal proceedings." McClellan's smile faltered slightly. "Then why are you here? To give you a chance. One chance to make this right." "Is that a threat?" McClellan's hand moved toward his desk drawer. "Just a fact." Caleb's voice remained quiet. "Like the fact that your son helped torture mine." McClellan stood up, face flushed. "Get out of my chambers before I call security." Caleb turned and walked out, leaving the judge trembling behind his expensive desk. The hardware store sat at the edge of town, its faded sign reading, "Lattimore's Home and Hardware," creaking in the breeze. The bell jingled as Caleb entered. Carl Lattimore stood behind the counter, a stocky man with calloused hands and hard eyes. "We're closing early today," Lattimore said without looking up. "This won't take long." Caleb's boots echoed on the worn wooden floor. Lattimore's head snapped up at his voice. Recognition crossed his face, followed by something darker. "You're that Freeman boy's daddy. And you're Tanner's father. Get out of my store." Lattimore's hand disappeared beneath the counter. "Your son took pictures while they beat mine." Caleb kept walking forward. "Posted them online before deleting them. But nothing really disappears from the internet." Lattimore's jaw clenched. "You got no proof." "You get one chance to make this right," Caleb said, just as he had to the others. "One!" Lattimore barked out a laugh. "Or what? You'll sue me? Good luck with that in Mason County. I'm not interested in lawsuits." Caleb turned and walked out, leaving Lattimore gripping whatever weapon he had hidden under the counter. That evening, as crickets chirped in the gathering darkness, 3 vehicles pulled up to Lattimore's barn: the sheriff's SUV, the judge's Mercedes, and Carl's pickup truck. The men gathered inside, their faces lit by a single hanging bulb. "He threatened all of us," Boyd said, pacing on the hay-strewn floor. McClellan perched on a wooden crate, looking out of place in his suit. "He's dangerous. Military-trained." "He's one man," Lattimore spat. "We run this county." "My sources say he's some kind of special forces," Boyd added. "We need to handle this before he starts digging." "Agreed," McClellan nodded. "A show of force. Remind him how things work here." I know some boys who can help, Lattimore said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Make sure he gets the message. The three men continued plotting in the dim barn, unaware that their world was about to change forever. The barn's single bulb cast long shadows across stacked hay bales and rusted farm equipment. Carl Lattimore twisted the cap off another beer, tossing it into a growing pile on the dirt floor. Sheriff Boyd lounged on an old tractor seat, while Judge McClellan perched uncomfortably on a wooden crate, his expensive suit gathering dust. This Freeman character, Boyd said, taking a long pull from his bottle. He's got that military look about him. The way he moves, like he's sizing everything up. Lattimore snorted. Don't matter how he moves, this is our town. My sources at the VA say he's not just military. Boyd leaned forward, lowering his voice despite being alone in the barn. He's a SEAL, one of those elite types. McClellan dabbed his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. Perhaps we should consider a more diplomatic approach? Diplomatic? Lattimore slammed his bottle down. Your boy helped teach that Freeman kid a lesson, same as mine. You getting soft, Charles? The judge's face reddened. I'm merely suggesting we think this through. Violence could escalate. Already thought it through. Lattimore cut him off. We send a message. Clear and simple. Boyd nodded slowly. I got deputies who'll look the other way. Could arrange something quiet like. An accident? McClellan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Accidents happen all the time, Lattimore said, grinning, especially to outsiders who don't know their place. The barn fell silent, except for the chirping of crickets outside. Boyd finished his beer and crushed the can. My cousin Billy, Lattimore continued, he's got some friends down in Meridian. Real hard cases. They could pay Freeman a visit, make sure he understands how things work around here. McClellan shifted on his crate. And if he reports it? To who? Boyd laughed. Me? I'd have to file that report myself. Could stage it like a robbery, Lattimore said, warming to the idea. Some boys break in, rough him up some. Take his wallet, make it look random. The judge loosened his tie. And if he fights back? You said he's trained. That's why we send enough men, Lattimore replied. 5, maybe 6. Nobody fights off those odds, SEAL or not. Boyd stood up, stretching. Need to be careful, though. Can't have it traced back. Billy's boys ain't stupid, Lattimore assured him. They know how to keep quiet, and they work cheap. McClellan pulled out his phone, checking the time. We should consider the repercussions if this goes wrong. Only thing going wrong is letting this uppity bastard threaten us, Lattimore growled. My daddy didn't build this town just to have some— Watch your mouth, Carl, Boyd interrupted. Walls have ears these days. Lattimore spat on the ground. Point is, we handle this now, or it gets worse. Man comes into my store, threatens me. In front of my customers? He didn't exactly threaten, McClellan pointed out. Just said we had one chance. Same damn thing, Lattimore's voice echoed off the barn walls. You want to wait until he does something? Until he comes after our boys? Boyd walked to the barn door, peering out into the darkness. Carl's right. Better to nip this in the bud. I know a place, Lattimore said, his voice dropping. Old hunting cabin, way out past the county line. Perfect spot for Billy's boys to have a conversation with Mr. Freeman. McClellan stood up, brushing hay from his pants. And if he doesn't survive this conversation? Lattimore's smile turned cruel in the dim light. Like the sheriff said, accidents happen, especially in old cabins. Electrical fires, gas leaks. Lots of things can go wrong in the woods. Jesus, Carl, McClellan whispered. You got a better idea, Judge? Lattimore challenged. Because that Freeman fellow, he ain't the type to back down. You saw his eyes. He means to cause trouble. Boyd returned to the group. We need to decide tonight. Either we handle this, or we risk everything we built. Everything our fathers built, Lattimore corrected. I'll call Billy now, get things moving. What they didn't notice, hidden in the shadows beyond the barn's weathered walls, was Caleb Freeman. He sat motionless in the darkness, a small parabolic microphone aimed precisely at the gathering through a gap in the wooden slats. His rental car was parked 2 lots over, behind Old Man Wilson's abandoned feed store. The device in his hands caught every word, every threat, every cruel laugh. Caleb's face remained expressionless as he listened, but his jaw tightened when Lattimore mentioned Billy's hard cases from Meridian. He knew the type, local muscle for hire, usually ex-cons with more brutality than brains. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of hay and motor oil. Caleb adjusted the headphones slightly, making sure the digital recorder caught every damning word. When Lattimore spoke about the hunting cabin, Caleb made a mental note. He knew the area they meant, isolated property just past the Miller Creek Bridge, where the county line curved around old logging roads. "We could plant something in his car," Boyd's voice came through clearly. "Got a deputy who can pull him over, find whatever we want in that trunk. Or better yet," Lattimore added, "get our boys to push his kid into throwing the first punch. Self-defense, right, Sheriff?" The recorder caught Boyd's lazy chuckle. "Ain't hard to make a charge stick when you're the one writing the report." McClellan's voice was shakier, less certain. "The boys on the track team. Good grades. College prospects. If we push too hard—" "That's the point," Lattimore cut in. "Let's see how tough Freeman acts when his boy's future goes up in smoke. One phone call to my friend on the school board, that college dream's dead anyway." Caleb's fingers tightened slightly on the microphone, but his breathing remained steady. Years of training had taught him to channel anger into focus. Each threat they made was another piece of evidence, another nail in their own coffin. "Could have Tanner and the boys rough him up again," Boyd suggested. "But this time, we plant a knife on the scene. Say he pulled it first." "Now you're thinking," Lattimore said. "Get our story straight. 3 witnesses against 1. Who's gonna believe him?" The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, each man adding layers to their plan. They discussed alibis, false witnesses, and ways to pressure other families into keeping quiet. Caleb recorded it all, his military-grade equipment capturing every incriminating detail. Finally, the men began gathering their empty bottles. Headlights swept across the barn as McClellan's luxury sedan pulled away first. Boyd followed a few minutes later in his patrol car. Lattimore stayed behind, making his call to Billy. "Yeah, tomorrow night," Lattimore spoke into his phone. "Bring 5 guys. Make it look random, but make it hurt. No hospitals. Just make sure he gets the message." After Lattimore's truck rumbled away, Caleb waited 10 full minutes in perfect stillness. The discipline that had kept him alive through countless missions now helped him remain patient, thorough. He checked the recording. 43 minutes of clear audio, every word preserved. Only then did he move, sliding through the shadows like a ghost. The barn door didn't make a sound as he slipped inside. His flashlight, barely brighter than a moonbeam, guided him to the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. With practiced efficiency, he unscrewed it, plunging the barn into darkness. From his pocket, he withdrew a single spent .45 caliber casing, military grade, the kind used in SEAL operations. He placed it precisely in the center of the wooden table where they had sat, positioning it so it would catch the morning light. The brass would tell them 2 things. First, that he had heard everything, and second, that he was capable of far more than they had imagined. But most importantly, it would make them wonder what else he might have left behind. Caleb took one last look around the barn, his trained eyes picking out details they had missed. Boot prints in the dust, fingerprints on bottles, cigarette butts that could yield DNA. Then he melted back into the darkness, leaving nothing but questions and fear behind him. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the trees when Sheriff Boyd pulled into the station parking lot. His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Where his patrol truck had been parked last night now sat a skeleton of metal, suspended on concrete blocks. The wheels were gone. The doors had vanished. The hood gaped open, engine parts missing like pulled teeth. Boyd stumbled out of his personal vehicle, spilling hot coffee on his uniform. The truck's frame rested perfectly level on 4 matching blocks, stripped cleaner than a Thanksgiving turkey. The seats were gone, the steering wheel missing, even the radio and light bar had been removed. Not a single bolt or screw remained that wasn't essential to keeping the frame intact. What in God's name? He spun around, searching for witnesses, but the street was empty. The bank's security camera across the street should have caught something, but when he looked up, he noticed its lens had been carefully covered with black tape. The station's own cameras were dark, their power cables cleanly cut. His deputy, Rick Martinez, came running out of the station. "Sheriff, I just got here. I swear it was fine when I drove past at midnight." Boyd's face turned purple. "Get CSI down here now. I want prints, tire tracks, everything." But even as he barked orders, he knew they wouldn't find anything. This wasn't some random theft. This was a message. The precision of it, the absolute thoroughness. This was military work. His hands started shaking as he thought about Freeman's warning. Across town, Carl Lattimore's morning was going even worse. He'd arrived early to check inventory at his hardware store, only to find the heavy padlock on his private garage lying open on the ground, picked clean without a scratch. His hands trembled as he pushed the door open. The sight inside made his knees weak. His prized collection of hunting rifles, worth over $20,000, had been completely disassembled. Every piece was hanging from the ceiling on thin wire, spinning slowly in the morning breeze like some twisted wind chime. Barrels, stocks, triggers, and scopes, all separated and suspended at different heights. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, stepping into the garage. The pieces clinked softly against each other, creating an eerie melody. His grandfather's antique Winchester, his custom Remington, his son's first hunting rifle, all methodically taken apart. Not a single screw or spring was missing. They were just reorganized into this macabre display. On his workbench, each gun's ammunition had been arranged in perfect rows, the bullets removed from their casings, powder emptied. The casings formed a simple message: "Next time." Lattimore grabbed his phone with shaking fingers, dialing Boyd's number. The sheriff answered on the first ring. "Boyd! He was here! That bastard was in my garage! My guns!" "Shut up and listen!" Boyd cut him off, his voice tight with rage. "My truck's been stripped down to nothing, right in front of the station. Meet me at McClellan's office in 20 minutes. Don't call anyone else." Lattimore stared at his hanging gun parts, reality sinking in. How did he? I mean, this would take hours. Nobody heard anything. 20 minutes, Boyd repeated, and hung up. Lattimore locked up the garage, his heart pounding. As he climbed into his truck, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. On his dashboard was a small piece of paper he knew hadn't been there last night. It was a receipt from his own store, dated 3 years ago. The sale of rope and lighter fluid to his son, the same day Jalen Freeman had been attacked. He crumpled the receipt in his fist, but couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Evidence. The bastard was collecting evidence. And if he could get into a locked garage, into a police truck right in front of the station, then nowhere was safe. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Mason County. At the police station, forensics would find no fingerprints, no tool marks, no traces of how the truck had been stripped so thoroughly. In Lattimore's garage, the gun parts would continue their slow dance, each piece catching the light like a warning sign. Neither man noticed the rental car parked at the Sunset Motel, or the figure watching through partially closed blinds, methodically checking items off a list in a small black notebook. Judge Charles McClellan prided himself on routine. Every morning, his secretary Margaret brought his coffee at precisely 8:15 a.m., placed it on the right corner of his desk, and laid out his case files for the day. But this morning, something was off. An unmarked manila envelope sat squarely in the center of his polished oak desk. "Margaret!" he called out, his voice sharp. "What's this envelope?" His secretary appeared in the doorway, frowning. "I haven't been in yet, Your Honor. The cleaning crew must have left it." McClellan's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed, just tucked closed. Inside, he found a stack of glossy photographs that made his stomach turn. The first showed his son, Colton, face clearly visible despite the hood he'd worn that night, standing over Jalen Freeman's crumpled form. The cross burning in the background cast an orange glow across the scene. "Dear God," he whispered, flipping through more photos. Each one was crystal clear, showing every participant, every action. But it was the second set of documents that made his blood run cold. Typed pages listed names, dates, and case numbers. Dozens of trials he'd presided over where evidence had mysteriously disappeared, where certain witnesses never made it to the stand, where verdicts seemed predetermined. Next to each entry were names of potential witnesses who could verify the corruption. His office phone rang, making him jump. It was Carl Lattimore. "Charles, we've got trouble." Lattimore's voice was shaky. "Boyd's truck got stripped clean, and someone turned my gun collection into some kind of sick art display." McClellan barely heard him, still staring at the documents. "He was in my office," he said quietly. "He left. Evidence. Photos of Colton at the attack. And other things. Old cases." "What do we do?" Lattimore asked. Before McClellan could answer, his computer screen flickered. A text document opened by itself, words appearing letter by letter. "You didn't listen the first time." The same message appeared simultaneously on Boyd's station computer and Lattimore's store register display. Each man felt the weight of those 6 words like a physical blow. McClellan called an emergency meeting in his chambers. Boyd arrived still wearing his coffee-stained uniform, and Lattimore couldn't stop fidgeting with his car keys. "This is military-grade psychological warfare," Boyd said, pacing. "He's showing us he can get to anything. Our property, our secure locations, our past sins. He's not just some angry father. He's a goddamn ghost." "We need to call in state police," Lattimore suggested. McClellan shook his head, gesturing at the photos and documents. "And tell them what? That we're being harassed by someone who has evidence of our sons committing a hate crime? That he's gathered proof of judicial misconduct? We're trapped." "Then we fight back," Boyd growled. "I've got deputies." "Your deputies couldn't even protect your own truck," McClellan snapped. "He got past station security like it wasn't even there. Face it, we're dealing with someone way beyond our level." As the men argued, across town in the Freeman's backyard, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Caleb stood facing his son in the fading evening light, both wearing workout clothes. "First lesson," Caleb said quietly, demonstrating a basic stance. "Power doesn't come from size. It comes from leverage and knowledge." Jalen mirrored his father's position, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. His bruises were still visible, but his eyes were focused. "When someone grabs you from behind," Caleb continued, moving slowly to demonstrate, "they expect you to pull forward. Instead, you drop your weight and step back, like this." For the next hour, father and son moved through various holds and escapes. Caleb's instructions were clear and precise, each movement broken down to its essential components. He showed Jalen how to turn an attacker's strength against them, how to break free from common holds, how to disable without causing permanent damage. "Remember," Caleb said, as they practiced a wrist release, "this isn't about revenge. It's about being ready, about never being a victim again." Jalen nodded, sweat dripping from his forehead, as he successfully broke free from his father's grip. His movements were becoming smoother, more confident with each repetition. The sun set behind the trees as they continued their training, casting long shadows across the yard. Inside the house, Letitia watched through the kitchen window, her heart both heavy and hopeful as she witnessed this quiet moment between father and son. Judge McClellan's key scraped in the lock of his front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. His wife was visiting her sister in Memphis, and Colton should still be at baseball practice. But something felt wrong. The air seemed different, charged with an unfamiliar tension. He stepped into the foyer, setting his briefcase down with a soft thud. That's when he smelled it. Fresh coffee brewing in his kitchen. Coffee he hadn't made. McClellan's hand instinctively moved toward the small of his back, where he kept his concealed .38 revolver. But before his fingers could touch the grip, a calm voice called out from the kitchen. "Your gun won't help you, Judge. Please, join me for coffee." McClellan's throat went dry. He recognized that voice, measured, controlled, almost gentle. The voice of Caleb Freeman. Moving slowly, the judge rounded the corner into his kitchen. Caleb sat at the oak table, 2 mugs of steaming coffee in front of him. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, a gray t-shirt that showed his muscled arms. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp and focused. "How did you get in?" McClellan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You should upgrade your locks," Caleb replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit. Your coffee's getting cold." McClellan's legs felt weak as he lowered himself into the chair. His kitchen, normally his sanctuary where he enjoyed morning papers and evening scotch, felt alien now. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows seemed too bright, too exposing. "I assume you got my message yesterday," Caleb said, taking a slow sip from his mug. "The photos, the case files, those were private records," McClellan protested weakly. "You had no right. Like my son had no right to walk home without being attacked?" Caleb's voice remained steady, but his eyes hardened. "Like those defendants had no right to fair trials." McClellan's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee mug. "What do you want?" "I want you to do the right thing," Caleb said. "Take Colton to the police station. Have him confess. Then you'll make a public apology to my son." The judge's face flushed red. "You're insane. Do you know what that would do to my family? To my career?" "I do," Caleb nodded. "Just like I know what your son and his friends did to my family. To my son's sense of safety. To his dignity." McClellan's eyes darted to the kitchen drawer where he kept his backup revolver. Caleb noticed. "Try it," he said quietly. "I searched your house for weapons before you arrived. You really should vary your hiding spots." Sweat beaded on McClellan's forehead. This man had been in his house, through his belongings, probably read his private papers. The violation made him feel naked, exposed. "You can't intimidate me." McClellan tried to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked. "I'm an elected official." "I'm not here to intimidate you," Caleb replied, setting his mug down carefully. "I'm here to give you one last chance to show your son what real justice looks like, what real courage looks like. By destroying everything we've built, everything I've worked for, by showing him that actions have consequences." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "That privilege doesn't make you untouchable. That hurting people because of their skin color isn't something we accept anymore." McClellan's hands clenched into fists on the table. "And if I refuse? Then I'll have to handle things differently," Caleb said, his voice still calm but carrying an edge that made McClellan's spine tingle. "And trust me, Judge, you won't like how that plays out." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Through the window, birds chirped in the maple tree outside, oblivious to the tension within. McClellan stared into his coffee, watching his distorted reflection in the dark liquid. "How long do I have to decide?" he finally asked. "Until tomorrow morning." Caleb stood up smoothly. 8 a.m. After that, things get complicated. He walked to the kitchen door, then paused. "Oh, and Judge? Don't bother calling Boyd or Lattimore. They're getting similar visits today. I know all about your plan to ambush me. You better call those boys off." McClellan's face hardened. He straightened in his chair, trying to reclaim some authority. "You come into my house, threaten me, and expect compliance? Do you know who I am in this town?" "A man who raised his son to hate," Caleb replied evenly. "A man who twists justice to serve his prejudice. That's who you are." "My family built this county." McClellan's voice rose. "We've maintained order here for generations. You people just don't understand your place." "Our place?" Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "Tell me more about our place, Judge." McClellan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "I won't be lectured in my own home by some—" "Sit down." Caleb's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Please." Something in that quiet command made McClellan's knees buckle. He sank back into his chair. "Here's what's going to happen," Caleb continued. "You're going to sign a confession detailing your role in covering up hate crimes. You're going to take Colton to the station and have him tell the truth. Then you'll publicly apologize to my son." "Never!" McClellan spat. "You can't prove anything. I have the rope fibers, the cigarette butts, tire tracks that match your son's truck, witnesses who saw them drive by. But more importantly," Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping lower, "I have the truth, and truth has a way of coming out." McClellan's hand inched toward the kitchen drawer. "Get out of my house. Last chance, Judge. Do the right thing. Show your son there's a better way." McClellan lunged for the drawer, yanking it open. His fingers closed around the revolver's grip. But before he could raise it, Caleb moved with frightening speed. One hand clamped down on McClellan's wrist, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. The other hand grabbed the judge's collar. In one fluid motion, Caleb slammed McClellan's head against the table. The judge slumped, dazed. "Wrong choice," Caleb said softly. Working quickly and methodically, Caleb dragged McClellan to his study. He stripped the judge down to his underwear, a final humiliation for a proud man. Using duct tape from his pocket, he secured McClellan to the leather office chair, arms bound behind his back, ankles taped to the chair legs. On the mahogany desk, Caleb placed a formal confession he'd prepared, along with a pen. He'd typed out every detail: dates, names, incidents of judicial misconduct. All it needed was a signature. McClellan's head lolled as he regained consciousness. His eyes widened in panic when he realized his situation. "You're insane," he slurred. "They'll hunt you down for this." "No one's hunting anyone," Caleb replied, checking the tape bonds. "You're going to have a quiet breakdown. Stress of the job, maybe. People will whisper, but they'll understand. Happens to men in power sometimes. You won't get away with this." McClellan struggled weakly against the tape. "I already have." Caleb walked to the door. "Someone will find you eventually. Maybe you'll sign the confession. Maybe you won't. But everyone will know your true character now." He paused in the doorway. "One more thing, Judge. If anything happens to my son again, anything at all, I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so gentle." Hours passed. The sun set, casting long shadows through the study windows. McClellan's shoulders ached. his mouth dry from the tape across it. When Sarah Jenkins, his court clerk, finally found him after he missed afternoon sessions, her scream echoed through the empty house. Word spread quickly but quietly through Mason County. Judge McClellan had suffered some kind of breakdown, found in his underwear, ranting about Navy SEALs and conspiracies. Such a shame. The pressure must have finally gotten to him. But in certain circles, in country club lounges and back rooms where powerful men gathered, a different kind of whisper spread. A warning, a reminder that no power lasted forever, that justice came in many forms. Sheriff Boyd eased his truck onto the familiar dirt path, gravel crunching under the tires. The sun was just starting to paint the sky pink, casting long shadows through the pine trees. This was his time, his escape from the mess that Freeman Man had stirred up. He grabbed his rifle and hunting vest from the passenger seat, checking the ammunition with practiced hands. The familiar weight of the gun brought him comfort. Out here, he was still in control. Still the man his daddy had raised him to be. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. Boyd adjusted his cap and started down his usual trail, boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. He'd been hunting these woods for 30 years. Every tree, every ridge, every animal trail. He knew them all like the back of his hand. His mind wandered to Chase as he walked. The boy had been quiet lately, jumpy even. Not the son of a sheriff should act. Boyd's jaw clenched. That Freeman kid had gotten into his boy's head somehow. Made him doubt himself. Made him weak. "Gonna set things right," Boyd muttered to himself, checking his scope. "Show everyone who really runs this county." He paused at a fallen log, his usual rest spot. Something felt off. The woods were too quiet. No bird song, no squirrels chattering in the branches. Every hunter's instinct told him he wasn't alone. "Beautiful morning for a hunt," a voice said behind him. Boyd spun around, rifle raised. Caleb Freeman stood there, unarmed, hands in the pockets of his jacket. He looked completely at ease, like he was taking a casual morning stroll. "This is private property," Boyd growled, keeping the rifle trained on Caleb's chest. "You're trespassing." "Funny thing about property," Caleb said, taking a step forward. "It only matters if you can hold on to it." "Stop right there!" Boyd's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'll shoot you where you stand." "No, you won't." Caleb took another step. "Because deep down, under all that badge and bluster, you're a coward, just like your boy." Boyd's face flushed red. "You don't talk about my son." "Chase cried, you know," Caleb continued, still advancing, "when they were beating my boy. Didn't want to do it. But he was more scared of disappointing his daddy than doing what was right. I said, 'Stop!'" Boyd's hands were shaking now. "Make me!" Boyd squeezed the trigger. The click of an empty chamber echoed through the trees. He pulled again. Click, click, click. Caleb reached into his pocket and held up a handful of rifle cartridges. "Looking for these?" With a roar, Boyd swung the rifle like a club. Caleb moved like water, stepping inside the wild swing. His elbow connected with Boyd's solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. The rifle clattered to the ground. Boyd stumbled back, gasping. He was a big man, used to throwing his weight around. But Caleb moved with the fluid precision of a predator. Each strike was calculated, measured, designed to hurt. "Fight back!" Boyd wheezed, swinging haymakers that hit nothing but air. "Fight like a man!" "I'm not here to fight," Caleb replied, deflecting another wild punch. "I'm here to teach." His fist drove into Boyd's kidney. The sheriff doubled over, retching. A knee caught him in the face as he bent forward. Blood sprayed from his nose. Boyd fell to his knees, spitting red onto the leaves. His whole body trembled. For the first time in decades, he felt small, helpless. like the bullied kid he'd once been before he learned to become the bully. "Your badge," Caleb said quietly. "Take it off." "Go to hell," Boyd gasped. Caleb's boot came down on the badge, pinning it to Boyd's chest. The pressure increased slowly, inexorably. Boyd could feel the metal digging into his flesh through his shirt. "Take it off." With shaking fingers, Boyd unpinned the badge. Caleb's boot lifted, allowing him to drop it on the ground. The morning sun caught the metal, making it gleam one last time before Caleb's heel came down. The crack of breaking metal seemed to echo through the silent woods. Through swollen eyes, Boyd watched as Caleb methodically cleaned his hands with a cloth from his pocket. The morning light filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, where drops of Boyd's blood stained the leaves. "You know what the difference is between us?" Caleb asked, his voice steady, despite the violence he'd just delivered. "I could kill you right now, but I won't, because my son needs to see justice done right, not revenge." Boyd tried to respond, but his jaw wouldn't work properly. He could taste copper in his mouth, feel the ache of loose teeth. His ribs screamed with every breath. In 25 years wearing the badge, he'd never been beaten like this. Caleb pulled a length of rope from his jacket pocket and began securing Boyd to the thick pine trunk. His movements were precise, professional, the knots tight enough to hold, but not cut off circulation. Boyd recognized the technique from his police training. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated. "My boy," Boyd finally managed to slur through bloody lips. "Leave Chase alone. Your boy needs to learn what you never did," Caleb replied, checking the bindings. "Actions have consequences. Real ones. Not the kind you can make disappear with a badge and a handshake." The broken shield lay in pieces by Boyd's feet, morning dew already gathering on the shattered metal. His father had pinned that badge on him 25 years ago. Now it was just twisted scrap, like everything else he'd built his life around. "They'll come looking," Boyd threatened weakly. "Let them." Caleb stood, surveying his work. "Tell them whatever story helps you sleep at night. Tell them you fell. Tell them wild dogs got you. I don't care. But remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be helpless. To have no one coming to help you." He knelt down, meeting Boyd's terrified gaze. "That's how my son felt. That's how every person you've wronged felt. The only difference is, I'm letting you live to think about it." Boyd's head throbbed. He could feel consciousness slipping away, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was Caleb walking away, disappearing into the morning mist like a ghost. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, warming Boyd's battered face. Birds returned to the trees, their songs a mockery of his pain. He drifted in and out, time becoming meaningless. Finally, voices cut through his haze. Flashlight beams danced across his face. "Sheriff! Jesus Christ, Sheriff Boyd!" Deputy Martinez's young face swam into view as he cut through the ropes. Other deputies gathered around, their radios crackling with urgent chatter. "Call an ambulance." "Who did this?" "Should we set up roadblocks?" "No," Boyd croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "No reports. No investigation." Martinez helped him sit up, concern etched on his face. "But sir, you've been assaulted. We need to—" "I said no!" Boyd snapped, then winced at the pain it caused. "I fell. That's all. Tripped and hit my head. Got tangled in some vines. Understanding me, deputy?" The younger man's eyes darted to the broken badge, then back to Boyd's face. Understanding dawned in his expression. "Yes, sir. A fall. I'll make sure everyone knows." They helped Boyd to his feet. His legs shook like a newborn colt's. Everything hurt. But worse than the physical pain was the knowledge that he'd been beaten, truly beaten, for the first time in his life. His power, his control, his untouchable status, all gone with his shattered badge. As they half carried him back to the trail, Boyd caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. Just a shadow, maybe a trick of the light. But he knew. Caleb was still watching. Would always be watching. For the first time in his life, Sheriff Darrell Boyd was afraid. Not of death or pain, but of justice. Real justice. The kind that couldn't be bought off or bullied away. The kind that came with quiet footsteps in the woods and left broken badges in its wake. Carl Lattimore's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of his workbench. The evening light filtered through the dusty windows of his hardware store's back room, casting long shadows across the worried faces of the 3 teenagers before him. His son Tanner stood in the middle, flanked by Chase Boyd and Colton McClellan, all of them looking considerably less confident than they had a week ago. "Your fathers are weak," Carl spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Boyd's lying in bed with broken ribs. McClellan won't even leave his house. But I'm not backing down to some uppity soldier who thinks he can walk into our town and change things." Tanner shifted his weight, a familiar spark of cruel anticipation lighting up his eyes. "What do you want us to do, Dad?" Carl stopped pacing and leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "That Freeman boy needs to learn his place. His daddy might think he's tough, but he can't be everywhere at once." Chase Boyd rubbed his jaw nervously. "My dad said to lay low. He said, 'Your dad's a coward.'" Carl slammed his fist on the workbench, making tools rattle. "All my hunting rifles destroyed. Boyd's truck stripped clean. McClellan tied up like an animal. And what are they doing? Hiding. Someone needs to show these people there are still consequences in this town." Colton McClellan, usually the quietest of the 3, spoke up. "But what if Freeman's dad—" "He won't be a problem if you do this right." Carl cut him off. He pulled open a drawer and removed 3 black ski masks, tossing them onto the workbench. "You wear these. You catch the boy alone. You make sure he understands that his daddy's little show of force doesn't change anything." Tanner picked up one of the masks, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "We'll handle it, Dad. Just like last time." Carl grabbed his son's shoulder, squeezing hard enough to make the boy wince. "No crosses this time. No pictures. No evidence. Just fists and a message. Make it quick. Make it hurt. And make sure he knows why." The other 2 boys exchanged uncertain glances, but Tanner's enthusiasm seemed to steady them. They'd followed his lead before, and the rush of power they'd felt that day in the woods still burned in their memories. "When?" Chase asked, finally picking up his mask. "Tomorrow after school," Carl said. "He always walks home alone after track practice. Same route through the woods." He turned to Tanner. "You've been watching him?" Tanner nodded, practically bouncing with anticipation. "Yeah, every day this week. He thinks he's tough now, doing those little karate moves in his backyard with his dad. But 3-on-1? He won't stand a chance." Carl's face darkened. "Make sure of that. I don't want him fighting back. I want him broken. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it." The boys huddled closer as Carl laid out the plan. The route, the timing, the escape path, everything methodical, everything designed to leave no trace. This wasn't just about Jalen anymore. This was about proving that nothing had changed, that their power still held. "What about our dads?" Colton asked, his voice small. "They'll know it was us. They'll thank us," Tanner answered before his father could. "Deep down, they know this needs to be done. They're just scared right now." Carl nodded approvingly at his son. "Exactly. Sometimes the sons have to be stronger than their fathers. Tomorrow, you show everyone in this town that nothing's changed, that we're still in charge." The evening light had faded to purple dusk outside the windows. Carl watched as the boys stuffed the masks into their backpacks, their movements charged with nervous energy. They were scared, yes, but that fear would make them cruel. Fear always did. "One more thing," Carl said as they turned to leave. "If he fights back, if he so much as raises a hand to defend himself, you make him regret it. Show him what happens to people who don't know their place." The boys nodded, filing out through the back door into the gathering darkness. Carl watched them go, pride and anger mixing in his chest. His son would make things right. His son wouldn't bend like the others. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the Freemans' living room windows as Jalen finished his homework at the kitchen table. His mom's nursing shift wouldn't end for hours, and the house felt too quiet. Every creak made him tense. His father's words echoed in his mind. "Stay alert. Trust your instincts." The first sign was subtle, a scraping sound at the back door. Jalen's heart pounded as he silently moved to the hallway, positioning himself as his father had taught him. 3 shadows passed by the kitchen window. He recognized their shapes immediately. The door burst open with a crack of splintering wood. Tanner Lattimore led the charge, wearing a black ski mask that couldn't hide his swagger. Chase Boyd and Colton McClellan followed close behind, their own masks betraying nervous energy in their movements. "Surprise, boy!" Tanner sneered, advancing with clenched fists. "Daddy's not here to protect you now." Jalen's mind went calm, just like during training. He planted his feet exactly as his father showed him, keeping his breathing steady. "Leave! Now!" Chase lunged first, swinging wild. Jalen stepped inside the punch, just like he'd practiced countless times in the backyard. His elbow caught Chase's extended arm at the perfect angle. The crack was loud, followed by Chase's howl of pain as he crumpled to the floor, clutching his broken arm. "You're dead!" Tanner charged forward, but his rage made him sloppy. Jalen sidestepped, using Tanner's momentum to drive him face first into the wall. Picture frames crashed down around him. Colton hesitated by the door, clearly torn between joining the fight and running. That hesitation cost him as Jalen closed the distance, driving his knee into Colton's stomach. The boy doubled over, gasping. "Get out!" Jalen's voice carried an authority that surprised even him. "Get out of my house!" Chase scrambled backward on his good arm, tears streaming down his face. Colton grabbed him, helping him up. They stumbled toward the door, leaving Tanner still dazed against the wall. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded through the windows. Someone had called the police, probably one of the neighbors who'd heard the commotion. Tanner pulled off his mask, a bloody grin spreading across his face. "Perfect timing," he said, just as 2 deputies burst through the open door, weapons drawn. "Hands up! Everyone on the ground!" Jalen raised his hands slowly, his heart sinking as he recognized Deputy Wilson, Sheriff Boyd's right-hand man. The other deputy rushed to Chase, who was sobbing dramatically now. "He attacked us!" Tanner shouted, playing his role perfectly. "We just came to talk, and he went crazy. Look what he did to Chase." Deputy Wilson roughly grabbed Jalen's arms, forcing them behind his back. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as the deputy tightened them unnecessarily hard. "That's not what happened," Jalen said firmly, keeping his voice level despite the rage and fear churning inside him. "They broke in. They were wearing masks. Look at the door." "Shut it!" Wilson growled, shoving Jalen toward the patrol car. "We got 3 witnesses saying you assaulted them when they came to visit. That's all I need to know." Through the car window, Jalen watched paramedics arrive to tend to Chase's arm. Tanner and Colton gave their statements, probably spinning whatever tale Carl Lattimore had prepared for them. The deputies didn't even bother photographing the broken door or the marks on the wall. The ride to the station passed in a blur. Booking was a series of humiliations. Fingerprints, mugshot, rough hands shoving him through metal detectors. They took his shoes, his belt, everything but his clothes. The cell was cold concrete and steel, smelling of bleach and despair. Jalen sat on the hard bench, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. Hours crawled by. Other deputies passed, some smirking, others carefully avoiding his gaze. He thought about his father's training, about how Caleb had prepared him for this moment without ever saying it directly. "The fight doesn't end when you win," he'd said. "It ends when you're safe." Jalen wasn't safe yet, but he wasn't afraid anymore either. He'd stood his ground. He'd protected himself. And now he waited, knowing that somewhere in the darkness his father was already moving, already planning, already bringing a different kind of justice to Mason County. The night grew deeper. Jalen didn't move from his spot against the wall. He didn't speak when deputies taunted him through the bars. He just sat and waited and remembered everything. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Caleb Freeman walked into the Mason County Sheriff's Station at 7 a.m. sharp. His boots clicked against the worn linoleum floor, each step measured and deliberate. The morning shift deputies looked up from their coffee cups, tension filling the air as they recognized him. Deputy Wilson's hand instinctively moved toward his holster. "Station's not open for visitors yet." Caleb didn't break stride. His voice was quiet, but carried across the room like thunder. "I'm here to see my son. Visiting hours start at 9. Now." Caleb planted his feet at the front desk. His eyes locked onto Wilson's, and something in that steady gaze made the deputy take a small step backward. Officer Martinez, a younger deputy who'd only been on the force 6 months, cleared his throat. I'll take you back, sir." He fumbled with his keys, pointedly avoiding Wilson's glare. The cell block door creaked open. Caleb's footsteps echoed down the narrow corridor until he reached the last cell on the left. Jalen sat exactly where he'd been all night, back straight against the wall, eyes alert despite the exhaustion evident on his face. "You okay?" Caleb asked, his voice softer now. Jalen nodded. They broke in, 3 of them, masks on. "I know." Caleb wrapped his fingers around the steel bars. "Tell me what happened next." "I did what you taught me. Chase came at me first. I broke his arm." There was a slight tremor in Jalen's voice. "Just like we practiced. Then Tanner and Colton. I handled it. But the deputies, you did everything right," Caleb said. "This isn't about last night. This is your final test." Jalen stood up, moving closer to the bars. "What do you mean?" "They think this cell breaks you, makes you afraid." Caleb's eyes were intense but proud. "But you're not afraid anymore, are you?" "No, sir." "Good. Because fear is what they want. Fear is how they've controlled this town for generations." Caleb glanced down the corridor where Martinez pretended not to listen. "Your mother's outside right now, with Reverend Jackson and half the church ladies. They're filing formal complaints with the county commissioner, the state police, and 3 different civil rights organizations." A small smile crossed Jalen's face. "Mom's not playing around." "Never does." Caleb reached through the bars, gripping his son's shoulder. "You held your ground. You protected our home. Now it's my turn to finish this." Through the station's front windows, they could see Letitia Freeman standing with a group of community leaders. She wore her nurse's scrubs, having come straight from her night shift, but her spine was steel as she spoke with reporters who'd begun gathering. "How long do I have to stay here?" Jalen asked. "Not long." Caleb's voice carried absolute certainty. "You'll walk out soon. I guarantee it. What are you going to do?" "What needs doing?" Caleb squeezed his son's shoulder one last time. "Stay strong. Keep your head up. Remember everything I taught you about patience." Deputy Martinez shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we need to wrap this up." Caleb nodded to his son and turned away. His footsteps were just as measured leaving as they had been arriving. The morning light streamed through the station's windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, Letitia caught his eye. A silent understanding passed between them. She would handle things here, working through proper channels, while he handled other matters. They'd learned long ago to trust each other's methods. The parking lot was filling up with news vans and protesters carrying hastily made signs. Caleb slipped through the crowd unnoticed, just another face in the growing chaos. His rental car sat in the back corner, unremarkable and forgettable. Inside the car, he pulled out his small black notebook. 2 names were already crossed out: Boyd and McClellan. His finger traced down to the final name: Carl Lattimore, the man who'd orchestrated last night's attack, who'd sent his own son to do his dirty work, who thought his hardware store empire made him untouchable. Caleb started the engine. The morning sun was climbing higher, promising another hot Mississippi day. He pulled out onto the main road, driving slow and steady. There was no need to rush. Carl Lattimore wasn't going anywhere. The warehouse sat dark and quiet on the edge of town, its metal walls reflecting the last orange rays of sunset. Caleb Freeman pulled his rental car behind a stack of shipping containers, killing the engine. He'd watched Carl Lattimore's routine for days. The man always stayed late on Thursdays, counting inventory alone after his workers left. The security system was basic, just cameras and motion sensors. Caleb found the electrical panel on the building's exterior and cut the main power line with practiced efficiency. Inside, emergency lights cast weak green shadows across rows of shelving stocked with hardware supplies. Caleb moved silently through the warehouse, his boots making no sound on the concrete floor. The layout was burned into his memory from earlier reconnaissance. Office in the back corner, gun safe visible through the window, Carl's preferred chair facing the door. A floorboard creaked under Caleb's foot. The sound echoed. "Who's there?" Carl's voice rang out, tight with fear. "I've got a shotgun, and I'll use it." Caleb stepped into view, hands loose at his sides. Carl stood trembling behind his desk, clutching a pump-action Remington. His eyes were wide, sweat beading on his forehead despite the evening chill. "Put it down," Caleb said quietly. "You don't want to make this worse." "Get out!" Carl's finger tightened on the trigger. "I'll kill you. You hear me? I'll—" Caleb moved before Carl could finish. 3 precise steps brought him inside the shotgun's arc. His left hand clamped the barrel up, while his right struck Carl's wrist. The weapon clattered to the floor. Carl swung wildly, desperation giving his strikes power but no accuracy. Caleb blocked a haymaker and drove his knee into Carl's stomach. The older man wheezed but kept fighting, grabbing a stapler from his desk and swinging it like a club. The makeshift weapon caught Caleb's shoulder. He grunted, switched tactics. This wasn't a clean takedown like with the judge, or a tactical fight like the sheriff. This was ugly, personal. A brawl between fathers with hate in their hearts. Carl slammed Caleb against the gun safe, trying to crush the breath from his lungs. Caleb headbutted him, feeling cartilage crunch. They crashed through a glass display case, sending fishing lures scattering across the floor. Blood ran down Carl's face as he screamed, "You people don't belong here! This is our town!" "Your time is done," Caleb replied, voice steady despite the exertion. He caught Carl's next punch and twisted, using the man's momentum to slam him face first into the wall. Carl staggered but wouldn't stay down, throwing office supplies and cursing. The fight moved through the warehouse, knocking over shelves of paint cans and power tools. Carl was stronger than he looked, running on pure hatred and fear. But Caleb had fought men like him before, men who confused cruelty for strength, who broke when their perceived power was stripped away. Finally, after 10 brutal minutes, Caleb caught Carl in a chokehold. The hardware store owner thrashed, then went limp. Caleb zip-tied his hands and feet, securing him to a support post where the morning crew would find him. Walking back to the office, Caleb picked up Carl's fallen shotgun and Carl's hunting knife from the desk drawer. He pressed the blade against the gun safe's metal surface, carving a single deep line down its face. The steel screamed as he worked, leaving a permanent scar on Carl's prized possession. "This ends tonight," Caleb said to Carl's unconscious form. He placed the knife just out of reach and walked to the office phone. He dialed the mayor's private number, knowing it would go to voicemail at this hour. When the recording beeped, he spoke clearly. "My son is still in that cell. You've got until morning." The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty parking lot of the Mason County Sheriff's Office. Caleb Freeman leaned against his rental car, arms crossed, watching the entrance with the patience of a man who'd spent countless hours on surveillance missions. His clean white shirt and pressed khakis made him look more like a businessman than a warrior. But his stance, balanced, alert, ready, told a different story. A few deputies hurried past him, avoiding eye contact. Word had spread fast about what happened at Lattimore's warehouse last night. Nobody wanted to be the one to challenge the quiet man waiting outside. Letitia's car pulled up at 8:15 a.m. sharp. She stepped out wearing her nurse's scrubs, a thick manila envelope tucked under her arm. Her face showed the strain of a sleepless night, but her steps were steady as she walked to stand beside her husband. "Everything's here," she said, patting the envelope. "Witness statements, medical records, photos of the injuries, plus documentation of similar incidents they've swept under the rug over the years." She glanced at Caleb. "Mr. Rawls helped me gather quite a collection." Caleb nodded once. "Good people remember." They didn't have to wait much longer. Mayor Thompson's black SUV rolled into the lot at 8:30. The mayor, a heavy-set man with thinning gray hair, climbed out looking distinctly uncomfortable. He wiped sweat from his forehead despite the mild morning air. "Mr. Freeman," he said, trying to sound authoritative but his voice wavering slightly. "Perhaps we could discuss this in my office?" "Here's fine," Caleb replied. His tone was conversational, almost friendly, but his eyes never left the mayor's face. The mayor shifted his weight. "Look, we all want what's best for the community. There's no need for this situation to escalate further." "My son spent the night in jail for defending himself," Letitia cut in, her voice sharp. "I'd say it's already escalated." She opened the envelope and handed the mayor a stack of papers. He flipped through them, his face growing paler with each page. "These incidents," he started. "Go back 15 years, Letitia finished. "All documented, all buried." Caleb straightened up from his car. The small movement made the mayor take an involuntary step back. "Simple solution," Caleb said quietly. "Drop the charges. Release my son. We all go home." The mayor looked between them, then at the damning paperwork in his hands. I'll need to make some calls." "Make them," Caleb said. The next 30 minutes moved quickly. Phone calls were made, papers were signed. By 9:15, the cell door opened and Jalen walked out, still wearing his clothes from yesterday. No reporters waited outside. No cameras flashed. Just a family walking to their cars while the mayor retreated to his office, already drafting damage control measures. Later that morning, a series of quiet announcements rippled through the town. Judge McClellan would be taking an extended medical leave, effective immediately. Sheriff Boyd had requested vacation time to deal with family matters. The school board scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss community healing initiatives. At Carl Lattimore's hardware store, a "For Sale" sign appeared in the window. His son Tanner wasn't in school that day, or the next. Caleb drove Jalen to May's Diner, a small place on the outskirts of town. They sat in a corner booth away from the few morning customers. The waitress brought coffee for Caleb, orange juice for Jalen, and plates of scrambled eggs and toast for both. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. Jalen's face still showed bruises, But he held himself differently now, straighter, more assured. He'd faced his fears and stood his ground. Nothing could take that away from him. The community center's old gymnasium echoed, with afternoon sunlight streaming through dusty windows. Jalen stood at the entrance, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the door handle. The bruises on his face had faded to yellowish marks, but the memory of that night in the woods still felt fresh. Miss Angela, the center's director for 15 years, looked up from her desk when Jalen walked in. Her face brightened with genuine warmth. "Jalen Freeman, we've missed you around here." "Hi, Miss Angela," Jalen said, his voice quiet but steady. "I was wondering if I could talk to you about something." She gestured to the chair across from her desk, concern crossing her features as she noticed the healing marks on his face. Everyone in town knew what had happened, but few spoke about it openly. "I want to teach some basic self-defense," Jalen said, straightening his shoulders. "To the younger kids, the ones who might need it." Miss Angela folded her hands on her desk, studying him carefully. "Are you sure you're ready for that, honey?" Jalen nodded, more confident now. "I learned some things, important things, about standing tall, about being ready." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "About not being afraid anymore." The old gymnasium had been cleared of basketball equipment, blue exercise mats spread across the wooden floor. 4 middle school boys stood in a loose line, shuffling nervously and watching Jalen with mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. They were all black, all small for their age, all carrying the same watchful look Jalen recognized from his own reflection. "First thing," Jalen said, his voice stronger than he expected, "is learning how to stand." He demonstrated the stance his father had taught him. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight balanced. This is your foundation. Everything starts here. From the back of the gym, almost hidden in the shadows, Caleb Freeman watched silently. His face remained neutral, but his eyes never left his son. Jalen moved between the boys, gently correcting their positions. "Keep your chin up," he told Marcus, the smallest one. "Eyes forward. You're not doing anything wrong by taking up space." They practiced basic blocks first, simple movements designed to deflect incoming strikes. Jalen remembered how his father had taught him, breaking down each motion into clear steps. "You're not trying to hurt anyone," he explained. "You're just making sure they can't hurt you." The boys began to relax as they moved, their initial awkwardness giving way to focused concentration. Jalen demonstrated a simple wrist escape, showing them how to twist free from a grab without panicking. "Sometimes people try to make you feel small," Jalen said, his voice carrying clearly across the gym. "They want you to believe you don't deserve to walk freely, to feel safe." He helped Chase, a lanky 12-year-old, perfect the escape motion. "But that's not true. You have the right to protect yourself." As the hour progressed, Jalen felt something shifting inside him. Each time he helped one of the boys correct their stance or praised their improvement, a small piece of his own fear seemed to dissolve. He wasn't just teaching techniques, he was sharing something deeper, something his father had given him. "Remember," Jalen said as they practiced sidesteps, "the goal isn't to fight. The goal is to be ready, to be strong, to know your worth." He demonstrated a smooth, defensive movement. When you know these things, sometimes you don't have to fight at all. The boys moved with growing confidence, their movements becoming more fluid. Jalen caught glimpses of pride in their eyes, the same pride he'd felt when he'd successfully defended himself that night at home. As the class drew to a close, Jalen lined the boys up again. They were sweating slightly, but standing straighter than when they'd arrived. He led them through a formal bow, just as his father had taught him. In the back of the gym, Caleb's stern expression softened into a smile as he watched his son. Jalen stood before his small class, his posture perfect, his head held high. The afternoon light caught his profile, highlighting not the fading bruises, but the strength that had always been there, waiting to emerge. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.